I'm Angela Daniels Mulazzem, Director and Co-Founder of the Mississippi Advocates for Prisoners Group. I'm also the wife of Jehoiakim Mulazzem, birth name Charles Daniels, whose human rights and constitutional rights have been violated and freedom taken away by the state of Mississippi and the Harrison County judicial system. My husband entered in the MDOC in 1982 when he was 23 and has been incarcerated for 34 years for attempted armed robbery, and no one was hurt nor killed nor any money taken. My husband was wrongfully convicted and his freedom taken away for 3+ decades based on no evidence at all and an eyewitness misidentification of one white lady's testimony, which did not match my husband's physical description or place of employment. Then a judge sentenced my husband to the maximum sentencing of that crime, 40 mandatory years of imprisonment, because he would not plead guilty and accept a plea deal of 5 years and racism, telling him at sentencing, "Nigger, you will never see the light of day again." Then my husband becomes a product of mass incarceration due to several important factors, such as factor number 1, excessive cruel and unusual punishment. In my husband's case, the punishment does not fit the crime and ineffective assistance of counsel. Factor number 2 of mass incarceration my husband experienced is the disparity of sentencing of disproportionate ratio of the number of black offenders to white offenders as habitual offenders under Mississippi Code 99-1981, who meet the criteria in said language of the law. And the discrimination in sentencing, the amount of time a black offender is sentenced to is extremely much more versus lesser time for white offenders sentenced for the same crime. For example, my husband was sentenced for 40 mandatory years versus a white offender being sentenced for 3 mandatory years for the same crime. Factor number 3 of mass incarceration his experience is the state of Mississippi constant misuse and constitutional violation of his 14th Amendment due to the state's deliberate act of not applying its own Mississippi Code 99-1981 is written. Mississippi has not applied this law to every offender, as the language begins with, in the law, every offender who meets the criteria. Mississippi discriminates on which offender to charge under this law by applying it to offenders based on race, and they use it as a tool of torture if an offender refuses to plead guilty or accept a plea deal, and or the offender chooses to exercise their constitutional rights to a trial. Solution. The federal government needs to mandate states who want to receive federal money for corrections to put a stop to all mandatory sentencing laws and put in place parole reform for states to release more rehabilitated people instead of holding them for profit. The federal government also needs to require every state to set reasonable sentencing guidelines for the nature of a crime. Last but not least, the federal government should prosecute the Corrections Corporation of America and states' government for unethical conduct of intentionally and deliberately incarcerating people for over excessive amounts of time for the sole purpose of making a profit for oneself, its stockholders, and politician campaign contributions, which we know is modern-day slavery, instead of correcting and rehabilitating these people for release into society, which we pray for freedom. Most people take for granted another day of freedom, but for my husband and so many more, it's another day of enslavement and torture. I ask that each of you take these testimonies and act upon them for justice, because today is my husband's freedom taken away, but tomorrow it could be yours, your child, your parent, your sibling, and even you. As a reminder, Dr. Martin Luther King told us, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Thank you for listening, and God bless.